And that is very dangerous because your conscience tells you that is, regardless of the debate you have, that your conscience always goes to you. It will tell you. It's black and white.
So it generates a lot of internal battles. So you generate a lot of bad scenarios where you try to justify those bad scenarios and you keep feeding this one and with more and more situation.
The concept of power emulates within us, akin to David's thought process or how computers simulate the human brain's function. What happens when you put more programs into a computer? Do you think more? He doesn't start debating to schedule himself. Doing that function is not me.
At some point, processing too much information overloads the system, making one slow and less efficient.
Exactly, you become slow and efficient. On the other hand, here you become volatile and aggressive, not because you get saturated. So for example, we have so much information in us that we live every day, and every day we debate with ourselves. We ask ourselves repeatedly, why this path? What's my purpose? Is this truly what I desire or need? And so the inner questions persist.
And much more so when you have a quote bad day.
So exactly why the mechanisms of having good mechanisms, for example, how to exercise, how to eat well, do yoga, or what do I know, talk to a friend, do this that we are doing. That is our way of making space in our brain. Because when you start, for example, right now we are talking about this, we are not thinking about any problem and saturation does not exist. We are not giving time to and not even the super ego to exist so that it debates, so that our ego begins to make decisions. So that's the detail. What are your healthy distractions? What are your mechanisms? From here, they call it coping mechanisms. It is a mechanism of how you form an alliance with good things, how you build access bridges to free yourself from the saturation of the normal stress of life, not from the daily decisions that you have to make, which are stressful no matter how minimal it is. Sometimes even when I go to eat, well, I already ate coffee and bread for 5 days in a row. I want to eat something different, no then? Of course, then we debated that, didn't we?
And here comes a thought. So this constant struggle between the superego and you could say that they are when people say is that I hear a lot of voices, but it's yourself. It's yourself in that constant struggle, at first in wanting to create a justification.
And is those voices that you hear, it's good or not bad? This has, or I'm trying to justify why I did this. That is that, in quotation marks, the voices that one hears.
Of course, the he and the superhero are like letters. They are like something that you compute and put in a computer, but it is not programmed. What programs it is the decision you make, and that programming makes it command to do an action. But it is, in other words, everything is, as they say, disorganized. So the job of the subconscious is to try to organize it as best as possible so that when the ego does not mean, the person begins to say, well, I evaluate. Here I lose more than I gain, right? And start evaluating. But your conscience comes, he says, well, regardless of what these two things tell you, this is good and this is evil. If he knows it, he recognizes it. And from there, you make that decision. And that's where it's just programmed. And it's amazing how the brain programs. This is so fast because you act immediately. So that is the detail of what is beautiful of the superego. Well, I the superego too. When you start creating healthy rules, for example, David, an obese person, starts eating healthier. Why? Because you say, well, I'm going to make this rule. I'm not going to eat rice anymore. I'm not going to eat carbohydrates anymore. I'm going to exercise 5 times a week. I'm going to go out for a run, and I'm also going to do breathing exercises. Make these rules, those rules. From there, it will make your your impulses also begin to change. Because if, for example, in a month, you have run a month, and your natural impulse is, hey, I need to run. I want to run because I want that serotonin, I want that oxytocin, I want that all these hormones that make me feel good. So the rules also make your impulses improve because there are good impulses and there are bad impulses too.
Setting rules strengthens the superego to elevate one's thinking above basic harmful tendencies. This progression fosters better mental governance and suppresses negative instincts.
Of course, the people thing.
Does it begin to evolve then?
It's exactly like he changed. It's as if, for example, it's not what it replaces. If it's not that, for example, if you had a bad diet and you install it, a new chip to that device that was bad and that is going to infect the bad, it infects the point that begins to create a, like, who says a completely new system. Because
Is there a program?
is it rescheduled for what? Because you are giving him the order that is made. I mean, you give him the order, you tell him, these are the new rules. This is our new programming. Now catch up, catch up. That's why people take time to change or improve. Why? Because it has programming, it arrives, and this programming also has to generate a cycle of change, and it takes time, right? So people are always asked when they start making these rules, at the same time, be patient with themselves. Don't be impatient, because unfortunately, we are not like a computer that puts in a hard drive and bam.
But that's why impatience is an instinct. Yes, an instinct. And then that's where they start, of course. Yeah. But as we said, this is a constant struggle. So reaching all these conclusions is also fun. How many times did he have to rack his head to draw these conclusions?
But me.
It just happens to us in these situations. Yes, it happens to us if you start to see what you say. First of all, we have to say from the moment we get up, we make many decisions. And here it comes. From there, this type of AA begins to go. I pray, and the ego that has to make the most correct decision. Because I set the alarm at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I can say, you don't know that it's very early. Me, 10 more minutes.
And
Come, no, you don't know. I have a lot of responsibilities. I have a lot of things to do better. I get up now and I'll start acting from there. This is a cascade of thoughts that, if guided well, generate positive and good reaction.
exactly so. For example, something we know is that, for example, the brain never likes to be uncomfortable. So that's why we like to have the truth. Because if from a super ego point of view, if you always have the truth, that means that everyone else has to change except you. Then changes are uncomfortable. Why? Because you have to reprocess something, retransmit it, and give it a new communication so that it can be reprogrammed. Let me give you an example, David. Let's not assume that someone has anger problem and they always react with anger, right? So for example, how can you treating a person to improve that? Then a lot of people say it's impossible. Of course, but here is where you must know the difference between theory and practice. For example, we see a lot of this on TikTok, on many social networks that says 5 benefits. So you cannot have depression. I mean, excuse me, but from theory to practice, there is a very large abyss, and
everything will depend on how you, as you said, you create truths and you create the bypass yourself. You do that bypass and you create your own rule.
well then,
Why? Because as you said, everyone generates its truth.
surely yet people rarely notice his absence. Why? Because there is I also creates pride, like a protective aura that doesn't let you see those things. That's why I tell you, I'm going to give you an example. A person who suffers from anger, or i.e. is impulsive in anger. So how should this patient be treated? Something that I practice a lot is not, for example, I put them on a treadmill and I tell them, run to the point where you really can't run anymore and I want you to stop. When they already succeed and say, I can't take it anymore, okay, put it down, and now I want you to sit down and start breathing until you have calmed down, then sometimes they don't understand why one does that, right? But what's the closest thing to anger?
That agitation of running.
The agitation, your heart beats, your adrenaline rises, because that's what happens. Not the kidney produces that adrenaline, the heart. No, then when you begin to make them understand that if they running and being exhausted with their heart in their throat can control that sensation in 1 minute, if they can do it in that extreme case, that breathing exercise can also be applied when they feel angry. So here's why I'm telling you the advice is very good, but the practices are even better.
Help us continue to embrace these human experiences and explore more about ourselves and others by just subscribing. If you like our content, definitely like, comment, share it. But also, if you want to be part of our podcast, all you have to do is leave a comment and tell us what you want to talk about. Remember, this is the platform for the people, and we're here to explore those life experiences that are very unique to you and to everyone else. Don't forget to subscribe.